Welcome to our webinar on managing a small business in difficult times. This morning we will chat with rugby legend and now serial entrepreneur and investor Jamie Heaslip about his experience as a small business owner and how he's managed to guide his businesses and investments through the current crisis. Morning, Jamie, and welcome to our webinar.
Sven, how are you? I'm getting used to this new way of reaching businesses and trying to help people out where possible. It's great.
Yeah, no, really appreciate your time and thank you for joining us. But before we go into this serious stuff, how would you describe your fitness levels at the moment? And do you get the workouts in, given that the gyms are closed most of the time?
Yeah. I'm doing okay. I track a lot of things, and my resting heart rate is around 43, 44 BPM right now. So I've got a couple of machines here at home, which are letting me kind of bring myself to a dark place, training wise, and yeah, keep myself ticking over. I think it's very important that you try and do what you can to keep the body physically healthy as well as mentally healthy, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah, my heart rate is at just close to 100 at the moment, which probably has to do with my coffee consumption, but also when it comes to using the online webinar platforms, there's always a bit of anxiety in the back of my head whether or not this is going to work, but delighted that it's working and we have you on camera. And as I said in my short introduction, I described you not as a serial killer, but as a serial entrepreneur and investor. Can you give us an idea of what businesses you are involved in at the moment, and how do you actually decide on where to invest and how to get involved?
Yeah, sure. I suppose to give you a whistle-stop tour of industries that I'm in. I'm in the sports data industry via a company called Kitman. I'm in the medical device industry called a company called Providence. I'm in the digital media kind of digital media industry through Love and Media Group. I'm in the hospitality sector through two pubs, Lemon and Duke and the Bridge 1859. I'm in the fintech sector with Flender, and I'm in the sustainability sector with Urban Vault. So kind of a wide and varied approach. I was in the kind of retail sector with Pointy, but we recently sold that into Google, and the deal was closed in January, which was good timing, all things considered. But yeah, so in terms of investing side, that's kind of the landscape. I tend to look at industries that I'm curious about first, and then dive into them a little bit and see kind of where it takes me. And in terms of a strategy, I don't really necessarily have a strategy. It's more about kind of trying to understand the industry, trying to get some knowledge about it, and then trying to find some really good people in it. And I suppose from my sporting background, I see the benefit of partnering with people who have really strong values. Because obviously the founder, I tend to invest as an angel investor, so very, very early on. And the founders are the ones who are going to set up the DNA of the company. So getting a really good idea of what they're about, or what that team is about, and then the idea that they have is what captures me. Then second, obviously, to it, and then you have like, okay, what's their plan? And do they live by their actions? Are they actually doing what they're saying as well? So a couple of different things there, but it really starts with the people, their values, and the culture that they're going to set up going forward.
And tell me, do you get operationally involved as well, or is it more from a strategic and investors perspective that you get involved in these businesses?
It's more, I suppose, so taking a step back, when I was playing rugby, obviously I couldn't be involved that much with them. So I initially set them all up where I would check in once a quarter. I sit on the board of one or two of them, and that was kind of that's how I set it up. And now as I kind of transition, I'm always going to be transitioning, I suppose, from playing professional sports, but I tend to try and spend a little bit more time with each one. So, when I finished up playing, I took some time off, traveled, did some, like, renovated our house, and we had our first kid and all that. And then I started spending a bit of time with Kitman Labs. And then I came, spent a bit of time with them, came away, went and worked in Google. I thought it would be wise to learn from one of the biggest tech companies in the world. I came out of that, and now I'm spending a good bit of time with Flender, and partnering with them. And then, I'll look to see, maybe I'll go to one of the other ones and spend a bit more time. Like, I might have to spend a bit more time now with the pubs and with everything that's going on, and as restrictions lift, how we get that business up and running again.
And tell me, if you look at your portfolio of investments, so you summarized it yourself as the sustainability side, the hospitality, the tech side, and then the finance. I mean, as a portfolio, you probably come out of this crisis quite well, but when you drill into the different sectors, you'll see that that's how we experience it from our membership, that the hospitality sector is going to be really impacted, so restaurants and pubs. And then probably nobody talks about sustainability anymore other than the program for government. Obviously, tech, you're probably doing quite well, and this is probably the one sector that's going to come out of really, really, really well. And then the fintech side, obviously, on the one hand, there's going to be huge demand for your lending products, but on the other hand, you have to keep your own risks under control as well when coming to the market with new lending products. Is that an accurate description of what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, they're all experiencing very different kind of situations. Like, the bottom line is that I don't think any industry is not affected by this. And I think everyone is feeling the pain, and everyone has to share this pain for us all to get through it. Because this is, there's no quick fix here. I think that's pretty clear to everyone. There's a long road to recovery, and we're going to have to adapt to that. But some are feeling it more than others. The hospitality sector in general, pubs, which are set up to be quite the opposite of enabling social distancing. It's almost social gathering is what it's set up for. That's going to be quite difficult. Hospitality, tourism, all these industries. But it's going to be very interesting to see how people adapt, pivot, how the government kind of play a role in this. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all goes. And I mean, for small and medium firms that are set up, it's tough for them right now because, there's different things that are in place. Everyone, there's different grant schemes. There's some government assistance, and can they be doing more? We can get into that later. But there's a lot of jobs at stake. You look at the pub industry. I think it's 50,000 people are employed directly in the pubs, and we're not even including suppliers and the knock-on effect of that. I know the Restaurant Association of Ireland, they've been quite vocal on it. I think it was north of 100,000 jobs they mentioned yesterday being affected. So people are going to have to, like there is a new normal, and people are going to have to adapt to it. But I think people need a little bit of help to adapt to it. Weird way, because I invest in a lot of startup companies, there's going to be a lot of innovation as well out of this. And that's why we need to also make sure that we still enable and still invest and empower that startup community in Ireland, because they were on track to have 100,000 new jobs by 2025, I think Scale Ireland said. And now with no government funding, that looks like it's going to be 20,000 jobs. So there's a couple of different battles. I mean, that's on the macro kind of level, but I suppose if you boil it down to a small company, it's still the same battles. It's the now. Okay, how are we managing now? How are we managing our stakeholders now? Okay, next is okay, what's that new scenario looking like? How are we adapting to that new environment as restrictions lift, as habits have changed? What habits are going to stay? What habits are going to change from consumers, from your clients? And then the long game, okay, how do we start scaling up again, or how do we get growth? I know for the pubs, for example, we're more like, okay, let's not that we're writing off the next 2 years, but we're very much like, okay, let's just survive the next 2 years. Okay, that's the long plan, and then we'll reassess that again maybe in a year's time. But that's how we kind of look now next along in three different sectors, and I think that's what if people haven't been doing it, that's what they need to start doing.
So if I recall last summer, and we recall it very fondly, and the bridge is very close to the RDS and obviously attracts large crowds before a rugby match, and then afterwards as well. Well, this is not going to happen, or is it? Just if I may ask a specific question around your pub investments. Are you planning on? Do you have scenarios now how to make it viable for let's say a third of normal crowds, or how are you working this?
It's you got to, like, everyone's operating on a margin, and then I suppose you got to understand, okay, if there's a drop in revenue, how is that affecting your margin in terms of your costs? And in pubs, your costs are kind of, in the most case, fairly set, regardless of the volume of people coming in. So it's just like, in terms of your drop in revenue, are you going to still have that margin? Is the business still viable? I think a lot of businesses are going to have that kind of moment where they have to look at, okay, the new normal now until a vaccine or whatever. What is that? What does that look like? How do we adapt that? How do we get through it? And we are trying to come up with different scenarios, work with different people that we trust, in terms of, okay, can we come up with new business models? Can we come up with new revenue models? Can we adapt our environment to facilitate it? Okay, if we do that, is it still a viable business? So there's a multitude of different things. But you're right. I mean, you look at, the bridge, for example, is right in the middle of Balls Bridge, and you've got the RDS on one side, you've got the Aviv Stadium on the other side, and you've got a new Facebook's new headquarters being built out. You've got a load of aircraft leasing companies down the way on Shelburne Road there. You've got a multitude of businesses around the area. So you're affected on events in both those two big, so you got big match days in both the RDS and the Aviva Stadium. You've got seminars and conferences in both. You've got concerts in both, all gone now. You've got businesses now who you would have got a good lunch trade, and you would after work drinks and after work dinner trade. They're all working from home. That's probably going to long continue. So, it's a challenging time for how we adapt and how we position ourselves going forward. But like sport, I do like the challenge, even though the rules have probably changed a little bit. We're looking forward. We're not looking forward, but I suppose we have the challenge in front of us, and we kind of, you got to accept it, or you got to roll over, and we definitely don't want to roll over.
Tell me, speaking of rules and changing rules, but sometimes it also required that we have to write new rules. So in that context, and you've touched on it earlier, what sort of help on your own individual business level would you be looking from government? Where could government support your individual businesses to help you go through this hibernation phase until you come out on the other side? Yeah,
it's very interesting. So, I think, prior to this, whatever, the government would have come under, government can separate people in terms of, are they doing a good job, doing a bad job? I think the general consensus is that they have managed this very well, being a temporary government. And I think they have put things in place, the wage subsidiary scheme, all these different kind of loan schemes that they're trying to put in place. And I think that they've done well. However, I don't think until there's a full-time government, put in place that we might not see a whole lot of big innovation or big ideation in terms of what they can and can't do. I mean, it was very, very interesting reading about, compared to other European countries who are spending about 16% of their GDP on kind of cash supports for businesses, are only spending 0.1% of GDP on it. And there's a lot of different factors, but you could argue that, okay, you need a little bit more cash in the hands of these small firms. The central bank, I think they said central bank came out with a study recently, and they said that small medium businesses will need about 5.75 billion worth of euro to get through this. And that's kind of, when you look at how a lot of small firms are set up, a lot of them, I think 50% in 2019, IBEX said 50%, 50 of Irish businesses don't have debt. So automatically that it makes me think, okay, they don't have debt, they don't have a real good, strong relationship with their bank. Okay, then a lot of them probably don't have the collateral that would, help their application to a bank to want any of these COVID-19 kind of schemes. So they have to come up with maybe perhaps different ideas in terms of loans, in terms of grants, that can help these businesses kind of get through, I suppose, because like otherwise, if they keep that as is, I mean, I think that there is going to be some difficult roles ahead regardless.
So that's the strange thing about this crisis, that even for argument's sake, if 50% of Irish small business, or Irish business in general, don't have any debt, that was before the crisis. So after the crisis, we'll see that lots of small businesses have availed of the revenue schemes where we can defer the VAT payments and PRSI payments. They probably haven't paid the commercial rates because they availed of not the rates holiday, but again the rates deferral coming out of this. The fear is that there is a mountain of debt that needs to be addressed at some stage, and it comes at a time where businesses haven't had an income stream for 3 months. So that really poses very, very difficult questions, and also needs government, once we have an acting one, to really come up with more drastic measures as they have come up now.
Yeah, I mean, again, I was listening to Adrian Cummins yesterday talking about, what about VAT? What can we do with VAT in the hospitality, retail, tourism sector? Can we just get rid of it for the year, or reduce it down, or agree a kind of a reduction this year and a gradual ramp up, or something like that? You know what I mean? I think there's going to be have to be some ideas coming out of this. But you're right, like the problem is that I don't know if a temporary government can make those decisions until, well, a government can make it until it's a full-time government, you know what I mean? Because it's just kind of quite limiting. But you're right, there's going to have to be some good ideas around this, and that ambiguity is kind of an added stress to businesses, because you're trying to communicate with your staff, you're trying to communicate with your customers, what the plan is, and I think not having a plan, or not being kind of given some sort of roadmap from the government, not for another couple of days anyway, it looks like, is the frustrating thing, because you can't plan. And I think some people are still thinking that overnight that it's going to switch and it come back to normal, but I just can't see that. I can't see that for a long time, in terms of spending habits of customers and demand. I can't see. I can see a slow ramp up, but we're talking months, years, possibly, not like weeks.
And tell me now, if you could put on your alternative lending hat for a second, any advice you could give to small business owners when they come to you? What and when they're looking for cash flow support or working capital support? Any advice for them?
Yeah, it's funny because you from Flender's perspective, being in that space, you see a lot of different you see a lot of different sides to the industry, I suppose. I mean, look at the COVID-19 kind of loan scheme that's been set up by the SBCI, and they might give you the green light, but then you come to a bank, a pillar bank, who can access the funds, and they might say no, and they'll say give you a slow no. We would. There's a lot of fintech providers coming together under the IFPI, which is the Independent Finance Providers of Ireland. Lobbying the government very hard to allow us have access to the same funding lines, and help allow us to help deploy that money through using our various different technologies, because you got to remember the lending habits and lending industry has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. You have asset-backed financing, you have working capital or term loan financing like ourselves. You have all sorts of different kind of really specific type fintech providers now. And so much so, we reckon about 25-30% of lending is done SME lending, which is about €1 billion a year. Or it's about I think it's 3.6 billion a year for Ireland in general in SME lending. About $1 billion of it is going through these different kind of providers. That it still makes up a considerable part of the industry, and we want to see how we can play our role in this, how we can get the cash into the hands of the people that need it. But coming back to what we're seeing is quite interesting, because we saw a big, in January, February, we had very big months, and then we saw a big uptake in the retail lending side, while our institutional lenders kind of went back and kind of stockpiled their money. So that, to me, that was quite encouraging. It means people are putting money on our platform to lend to Irish companies. Yes, they get a good return on the money, but it still goes through the same credit checks, and it's helping these Irish companies, with working capital. There's some companies that are actually, using it to kit out their staff to work at home. Some companies are actually pivoting and buying equipment to adapt to the new environment, and how their companies are surviving through it. So it's interesting to see it from a lot of different angles, and we're just trying to figure out how we help businesses more and more through it, and it's an interesting landscape.
Tell me, 5th of May is supposed to be the day when hopefully the restrictions are going to be lifted, although the signs are not quite there yet. We and the SFA have started putting some resources and supports in place that can help small businesses with the reopening and the reboot phase. How are you with your businesses going about? How have you started making plans yet for the big reopening, if there's such a thing, or the gradual reopening?
I think it's going to be a slow reopening is what it's going to be. But yeah, I suppose we have. I know I touched on the pubs. You got to figure out the layout. How does that work? And both our pubs are very particular type of layout. So how does social distancing work in that environment? How do you adapt to that? We're looking at that. Flender is purely an end-to-end digital platform, so we can all work from home and work remotely and help businesses remotely. So it doesn't really affect us there. What affects us there is we got to wait for these institutional lenders to come back before we can give companies bigger amounts to a certain degree, and that's why we're so dependent on the retail lending side. And we've seen that actually grow massively in March and April, with people kind of, they have spare cash, companies have spare cash, and they're putting in there to get a return over the next while. But in terms of the rest of the companies, they're adapting. In digital media, there's big demand for content, so they're trying to figure out how they create content while they're all working from home. So again, coming back to this, a lot of innovation will come out of this. A lot of habits will change. A lot of people will be working from home going forward forevermore. How do we adapt to that? So it's really interesting. You know, my angel investor hat comes into play then, and I start thinking, okay, what's happening in the IT sector? How do we enable people to work from home? What challenges are going to be faced? What challenges does a big corporation have when they're dealing with, you know, a workforce that are kind of dissipated now around Ireland as opposed to having them in one spot? So a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities, and I think, you know, people got to put you know, they've got to sit down and think about it, but you know, for their business, you know, in terms of what that looks like for their own staff, for their own customers, how they interact with them. You know, it's pretty dynamic, but like, I think people just want something, you know, some sort of roadmap and plan to be given to them, so we can understand how that's going to unfold. It could change, and that's fine, but you know, we need something. We can't just be going blindly into May.
Just maybe as nearly my last question to you. So 2 weeks ago, we started with a webinar on mental health and mental well-being. Last week we had a webinar on resilience and how to stay strong in difficult times. How do you stay positive? How do you look after not only your physical health but also your mental health?
I think a lot of it comes down to mindset, for want of a bit. Like, if you have a fixed mindset and you think, okay, I can't adapt, or my business can't adapt, or this is the way I've done things forever, how am I meant to go forward? You're going to get in trouble. You need a growth mindset to get through this. The environment has changed dramatically. There is a new normal. You have to adapt to it. And that will slowly change, very slowly change. And you'll have to adapt as you go along. That's both you as a person and your current scenario of staying within your 2 kilometers, and working from home and all that, and adapting to it. I think that's the first thing. And then, you know, as you break down, you know, in terms of practical terms, like the stuff that I'm doing is I'm having I kind of put a routine in place that gives me, you know, I feel like if I have a routine in place, I'll stick to it. I can get through my work, you know, to-do list. It'll take the stress off me of worrying about not feeling like you're accomplishing things throughout the day. It gives you comfort as well, as, you know, kind of like compound, you know, it kind of has that compound effect on you. The more you do it, the more those habits become kind of like your everyday habits, and it gives you kind of comfort and confidence. A lot of that is what we used to do coming into games. That's why you'd have such a routine coming into the games, because it would give you confidence, and it wouldn't be new. It would be what you're used to, and that kind of gives you a relaxing effect. And then getting balance between, you know, it's very hard to draw the lines between work life and home life when you are working from home. I'm very lucky. I used to work, I worked from home a lot prior to this, but you do have to draw the lines, and that's where a routine will come in place. And it's very important that you still get outside, that you still exercise, even if it's a 20-30 minute, you know, hour walk, and that you maybe, you know, practice kind of, you know, some mental well-being. That could be interacting with people, still connecting with people via Zoom or webinars or FaceTime or whatever. It could be, you know, it could be doing meditation, it could be journaling, you know, finding something that lets you decompress a little bit mentally as well. So striking that balance between when you're working, when you're not, when you are, you know, looking after your mental health, when you're looking at your physical health, because I don't think you can separate out the two. It's all the one, so you got to keep looking after it all.
Jamie, thank you so much. This talking about routines, we always have a routine of 30-minute webinars, and I think this is the perfect length, and we've already taken up that much of your day. So thank you so much for your thoughts and spending time with us. To all our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in this morning. We will circulate the recording of this webinar later this afternoon. And if you have any questions for Jamie, just email me, sven@sfa.ie, and I will make sure that Jamie gets them. And yes, thanks to all. Thanks again, Jamie. Stay safe, look after your families, and talk soon. God bless.
Take care.